Alrighty, welcome back everyone to another Bad Batch reaction for episode 4, I believe. So 5. Yes. So starting off this episode, I mean, just kind of like for me at least, I love this episode so much because the end of episode 4 kind of gave us that like cliffhanger of like, what is this reaction between Crosshair and Hunter and Wrecker? Like, how are their interactions going to be? And so that was my kind of thoughts at the beginning. I'm like, what is going to go on? Like, are we going to see a lot of fighting? Are we going to see kind of a lot of cold shoulders? Are we going to see kind of these weird, like, awkward silences between the two? Like, I don't know. I was excited to see what was going to go on. So kind of going based off that, did you guys have any of the same thoughts, or what did you think was going to happen? Kind of before we get jump right into it.
I really thought that they were gonna have more conversation between Crosshair and Hunter. However, it was enough to where I'm excited to see where they're next. Surprisingly saves Omega, and you're like, okay, there's that. They don't like each other right now, but like, Crosshair's not like crazy to let Omega just die, right? So it's less hostile for sure, and that final conversation they have is like the first time you see Broken Crosshair with them in the back in the batch, and it's cool to see.
Yeah, I'd agree with Jason. I think it was I mean, they kind of just got right into it, which I kind of liked. There wasn't actually like a ton of dialogue again, like you said, until the end of the episode. We kind of are left with this cliffhanger from episode 4 where you're like, okay, Crosshair's back. There's kind of a little bit of a standoff between Wrecker and Hunter and Crosshair, but they don't really explain it. They kind of just jump right in, and it's like, okay, they take Crosshair back to the planet with them. I don't know the name of that planet, but he's kind of just back, right? They give him his gun back. Obviously, Crosshair's kind of like training. He has some intel on like the Empire, but I felt like they kind of glanced over the fact that okay, like Crosshair's back, and they had all these kind of like pent up emotions that kind of kept on coming up from these kind of altercations that they had between Hunter and Crosshair for the past 2 seasons. But obviously, they're kind of just pushing those feelings aside, and nothing really comes to the front until they actually speak to each other at the end. There's a lot of like observing, right? Like Crosshair's kind of watching Hunter. Hunter and Wrecker are both obviously watching Crosshair, but there's not really a big breaking point until the end of the episode. So
Yeah, I really liked I honestly kind of like that standoffish because it wouldn't have made any sense if they just take him in and all of a sudden things are kind of good, right? And especially we've seen kind of Hunter at the beginning of the season kind of always um kind of be the cautious one, right? The one that's kind of like being methodical. He's being the tech kind of aspect. And you kind of see Hunter kind of taking more of this role of like as the reasoning behind everything. And I actually really love that conversation that him and Omega were having when he was like shooting and training. And he's just like, well, the best thing about being a sniper, or one of the things about being a sniper, isn't just about looking at the scope. It's to realize that the people watching you, right? And you see like them too, just up on the ridge. And Hunter, has the line where he's just like, I just don't know if we should have given back his gun. Like I'm skeptical about it. And then Wrecker's just like, if the kid trusts her, then I trust her, right? And so again, it's like Hunter just or Wrecker's just kind of acting as a kind of like a voice of reason between the two, right? He's kind of the level-headed one, and the one to kind of bring Hunter back down to earth. And I've really enjoyed that. And yeah, the dialogue between Hunter and Crosshair has been very minimal, but I think it was for a good reason, right? It was for to kind of show that there's somewhere to progress. They started off not really talking to each other, kind of exchanging glances at all. Hunter is observing while Crosshair is just trying to, you know, figure his life out now with the Bad Batch, and then, um, but yeah, I think it like the whole premise of the episode was super cool with that. And I really like that they touched on that.
Well, one part that you kind of brought up a few minutes ago, that kind of intro scene where Crosshair's training, he's shooting out across the ocean, and then Omega goes down, and they're kind of talking. I liked that scene a lot because that's kind of what we've seen be Omega's relationship with the rest of the Bad Batch for the past 2 seasons, right? It was like, okay, Hunter's teaching Omega this thing, and now Tech is teaching Omega this thing, and Wrecker's teaching this, and so they're all passing down these skills, but there hasn't necessarily been that interaction yet with Crosshair and Omega. But we start to see that right now. We're like kind of unpackaging who Crosshair is as a character through the lens of Omega, right? And it's not just like, okay, he's just like the guy that shoots things, but it's more of like a holistic, like, this is what I bring to the team. And for some reason he's teaching Omega that, and for some reason like Omega has kind of become his way back to the team, and like his connection within the team. He feels like very distant from Hunter and Wrecker and Echo, but for whatever reason, Omega is kind of there, kind of connecting him back again. So I liked that scene. I thought it was good.
Yeah, I was gonna say, continuing on, basically Echo's coming to report, kind of be as a representation for Rex and these clones that are kind of fighting against the Empire, and they need to know, they wanted to get the information that they have from Crosshair and Omega. And that was a funny scene. As soon as Echo comes in, right, Omega runs over, gives him a hug, and then Crosshair comes in and just makes like that witty line, right? He's like, "What? No hug for me?" And I thought that was funny too, because it was just like, we've seen kind of Crosshair as this brooding, like grumble type, right? Like, doesn't really sit there. He's just basically there to ruin everyone's mood. But the fact that he's like starting to crack jokes a little bit is funny, right? And the way that Echo responds in tone is like is also, I really liked, right? He's like, it depends on how good the intel you have. And I don't know, I just thought it was a funny interaction, because it's like Echo is still also very hesitant, be like, Crosshair's back, but I don't know how I feel about this. But he's just happy that everyone's trying to help the cause, right? He's still trying to get that. So I really like that scene where they have that conversation about what's going on with the data pad and how to access it, right? How to unlock it. And Crosshair comes up with, and he's like, "Oh, I know a place." To me, I'm pretty sure this was expected by everyone, but it took me a second to realize where they were going to. And it's so methodical and perfect, because this is the last place that he was an Imperial. And I think that was like super symbolic, because we're seeing this is where Crosshair changed. And this is where he became the man he is now. And they're going back to kind of revisit it. And so everyone's kind of shifty and dodgy with Crosshair at that point, and especially Hunter. So what do you guys think about that? What did you think about them arriving to the planet and kind of the whole interactions with them being on the planet? Or if you guys have anything to say for that too.
Well, it was definitely arguably the best episode of last season. That's was on that planet where Crosshair comes full circle. And so it also actually was a year ago today that they released that episode on season 2. So very cool to see that they back to the same planet in 2 episodes premiering a year apart. But it paid. They did it. I loved coming back to this planet. This planet meant so much for me in the Bad Batch TV show, as well as how I felt about clones of the Empire era. Right, we get so much of these 5 clones, but like this planet hosted Mayday, right? Who gets major props in this episode, and ultimately I think was the clone that helped Crosshair see the air in his way. And so I think this planet is it's not a home to Crosshair, but like it has more meaning to him than other planets that he slaughtered people on.
Right.
Yeah, no, I was thinking the same thing. I was like you, when he's like, "Hey, I know this place. It's kind of remote, whatever." I wasn't thinking of this. Then he got here. I'm like, "Oh, of course, right?" But again, just what the planet represents, right? Like you guys were both saying, it was like this is where his whole, I think, viewpoint shifted with the Empire, and he kind of realized, this isn't really what I signed up for. And again, shout out Mayday. Mayday was an awesome character. That was it was cool when I liked the part when he was kind of poking around. They're trying to get like the power up in the base, and Crosshair's kind of just poking around, and he finds the clone helmets on the ground, right? And he picks them up and he's like stacking them on top of the boxes and stuff. And again, you can just see that he's a different person than the last time that he was on this planet, right? So I thought that was definitely cool.
Yeah, I like that part too because it at the beginning of of season 1, you kind of think, oh, Crosshair has betrayed his brothers, right? I mean, Hunter keeps on saying that throughout the season, where he's just like, you just betrayed your brothers. Like, why would you do that thing, right? So
Mhm.
Hunter comes back and he sees Crosshair still as that kind of that traitor. And the fact that this almost kind of created almost a homely connection between the two, where Crosshair is sitting there, you know, he probably knows Hunter's watching it, but he's not doing it because Hunter's watching it. He's just doing there to pay his respects for Mayday and the other clones that were suffering on that planet, right? Because that was the whole thing. It's like they sent him to this backwater planet and they just forgot about him basically, and just kind of waited until, like Crosshair said, where they just waited for that outpost to basically do all that it's supposed to do, and then the Empire was just going to leave it, and they're probably going to leave the clones there too and just leave them. And so it's this tender moment between the two, and between Crosshair and kind of giving him more of like a human connection instead of this like robot we kind of grew to know him as. I'm curious though, do you guys know from season 2, did they in that episode, did they mention anything about like the beast that we end up seeing in the episode?
A little bit, yeah.
I know they
Um,
talked about the Raiders, but
they talked a lot about the beacons being the safe zone, and that's why it was like a big deal for them to go on foot to kill the Raiders. But a lot of it was about the vultures, and not as much about the creatures that are underneath the surface.
right.
Hmm.
Which I'm curious to hear your guys' take on that. What did you guys think about the worm, as they called it?
I mean, thought it was a fitting creature for the moment. I didn't think anything, special about it. I thought it was a. I was worried Hunter was gonna honestly like. I knew he was gonna make it, but I didn't know if he was gonna like. If it was gonna be that, I felt like it was an easier escape than what we've seen in some instances, especially like like Tech. Uh,
Right.
but yeah,
Yeah, no, I just felt like it was like, it was kind of just there, you know.
Yeah.
it
Which is
wasn't the
what
actual problem. It wasn't
Yeah.
what we were all like. It was like, okay, they made a plot to push the story of what we need to see.
right.
Mhm.
Kind of like they overcoming their differences through adversity. Almost that, right? Where it's like they're forced to be friends now because they have this common enemy. Which I kind of I'm with you, Jake, on that, and maybe a little bit different because I just thought it was an interesting aspect. I was like, okay, like I guess this is more. I felt like the creature was less part of the story and more of like what it caused the Bad Batch to do. Right? They ended up having to break up, and then of course Hunter was like, "I'm going with Crosshair," and all y'all can do your own thing. I'm going with him, and so I just thought it was an interesting thing, and maybe I'm just thinking too hard about it, but I just thought it was. I was like, okay, I guess it had to be something had to be put there. Like they had the story all laid out, but
Mhm.
they're like, we're missing this little key aspect. Okay, let's just add a worm in there that causes them to get together. That's kind of how I felt that whole thing was. But um, it was super cool to see like as they were kind of gaining the like putting the plan in place, that Batcher was kind of like the bloodhound with Crosshair, and Crosshair was like, I'm following this dog that I almost wanted to kill and leave behind multiple times. And so he kind of grown this affinity towards Batcher, which we kind of mentioned about how like we have our different theories about what's going to happen to him or to her. But it was kind of cool where it was like Crosshair was basically just trying to help um, Hunter get to like the end, and he could have well just been like, "No, I'm gonna leave you there because you're kind of helpless. You need to get out." And it was cool to see that Crosshair just created that I need to save him no matter what, and so I'm gonna get there, and hopefully, he didn't have to like lower his gun down to lift him up, right? Could just left him there, but he didn't, and I thought that was pretty. Um, I thought that was a great moment. So overall, I mean that nothing really. We didn't get much about the data pad in that episode. It was just saying that there was a bunch of like medical records, so that we didn't get. It didn't really further the plot that way, in the sense of like them getting closer to Tantus, but it did help us kind of rekindle that little fire that the Bad Batch had when we first had it. So um, there's not really much I wanted to cover for the rest of the episode, but what did you guys? Is there anything you guys wanted to bring up at the end? Is there anything that kind of touched you differently?
Yeah, Crosshair opening up to Hunter and Hunter's response, I really liked, but it wasn't what I thought he was gonna say. I feel like Hunter already knew that, and so I thought it was very it was humbling for Crosshair to bring up that like, hey, like I've made all these mistakes, like I thought I was doing the right thing, and Hunter to be like, hey, like hopefully there's always hope for a better tomorrow kind of thing. I thought my biggest thing is I'm waiting for Crosshair to tell them that he has a shake in his hand, and I think part of the tremor in his hand is from not wanting to tell them or wanting people to know because that's his thing. And if he doesn't have his thing, what is he? He lost. He's looking for who he is, and I think between leaving the Empire and the medication and all the tests, he's lost that part of him. And I personally think he's gonna get it back, but I thought he was gonna tell Hunter that, like, hey, like I'm not who I was as a person, but also like my skill, like the thing that makes me me, like I can't shoot very well anymore. But maybe long farther down the road, when they're better friends.
Yeah, no, I think you hit it right on. I think the aspects of the show, it's like this episode, did it really like was the purpose of this episode? Let's tell the story of how they're getting back to Tantus and freeing the clones and all of that. It's like that kind of felt like a subplot to the episode. And like the main purpose of this episode again was to kind of break the ice, if you will, on this relationship between Crosshair and the Bad Batch again, right? Like I loved seeing Crosshair back in his armor from Clone Wars, right? He's got the classic black and red Bad Batch armor, which was cool. But again, the overarching purpose of this episode wasn't, hey, let's get back to Tantus. It was like, okay, where are we at? And I think I liked what you're saying, Jason, where it was like, Hunter had these responses and this dialogue that wasn't maybe 100% what we expected, but it was what was needed to kind of start building that bridge again with Crosshair and saying, like we've all made mistakes here, and we're all just trying to do the best that we can to like one, protect our people, but also to like figure out what's our purpose in the galaxy, right? We've seen that the clones have kind of fulfilled their purpose, right, according to the Empire. And so now what's next, and yeah, I think that there's definitely there's going to be more episodes to come about Tantus and about figuring out where the clones go, but that's kind of my overall vibe with this episode and with this season is like, okay, like where are the clones going to be when it's all over, because this is like the official end of the Clone Wars for the clones. It's not just yeah, the war's over, but it's like, where do our boys end up? Where are they going?
Yeah, no, agreed. I think the conversation with Hunter and Crosshair left a little bit more to be desired. But I think that they're just waiting probably for more development between the two. And I think that's going to be an interesting aspect. But overall, I actually really like this episode. So why don't we just jump right into our ratings, and starting with you, Jake, what do you rate this episode?
Yeah, good question. I would probably go with the safe 7 out of 10. Again, I can't say it was necessarily my favorite episode, but I do love the fact that we're getting back to kind of a classic Bad Batch. We have Crosshair back with the boys. Again, do I want to see some more action besides, hey, we're just fighting this like snow worm thing and we're on a snowy planet? Like, yeah, it would be awesome to see more, but I do understand like the emotional significance of the episode and kind of the reconnection between Hunter and Wrecker and the kind of larger Bad Batch that needed to take place. So overall, I liked the episode. I think there's probably better ones on the way, but it was a solid 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I'm gonna go a little higher than Jake. I'm gonna go 7.25, just because great music moments, great heart-wrenching tech mentions.
Oh, yeah.
Echo's in it, so Echo coming back, give that a little boost. And then the whole plot push, it's not. I get the part where you're fighting a random beast, but I wouldn't call it filler, just because of what the real purpose of the episode was, and it's going in the direction that I know is going to rip my heart out. And so I know, like, I love that aspect, but also like the standalone episode as itself was awesome. Like, I really liked it, and on top of it, it's the same planet from one of my favorite episodes from season 2, and so that weight from that episode carrying to this moment where Crosshair's a new man. Yeah, it's not the best, it's not gonna be the best, but it was solid. So 7.25 for me.
Nice. And okay, to round it up, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. I think this was just an effect of just emotional investment that I have in the Bad Batch, and especially with Crosshair, because I was like, I feel like whenever I play some sort of video games, I'm always a sniper, so I have that connection with Crosshair, and I was like, that first episode in season 1 where he just kind of just leaves, I was devastated. I was like, are you kidding me? I was like, this is gonna be my favorite character, and all of a sudden he's gone, and he's evil, and so I'm like, okay, great. But the fact that he's coming back and kind of having this redemption arc starting made me really excited to see what he's going, like, at what lengths he's going to reach to get back into the good graces of the people he called his brothers at one point. So yeah, 8, solid 8. I loved it, and it, yeah, excited to see more. So thanks for joining me on this reaction, and we hope to see you guys in the next one. So peace.